It's actually the people around the whole world logging onto Netflix last night to find not one, not two, but 3 episodes from the new Harry and Meghan documentary. And after years of speculation, we got to hear their side of the story, their relationship, and also what happens beyond the tabloid.
The message was brief, formal, and devastating. Meghan's final remaining royal patronage had been removed, and the responsibility was being transferred directly to Princess Anne. But before the palace could contain the emotional fallout, Princess Beatrice stepped forward with an intervention nobody had expected. What looked like a routine redistribution of royal duty suddenly became something far more personal, because Beatrice was not challenging the decision itself. She was challenging what happened next. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan read the final paragraph twice. She did not ask a question. Harry watched her lower the message onto the table and understood from her silence that this meant more than another adjustment. A royal patronage, the formal link through which a member of the family lends visibility, prestige, and support to an organization, had been the last thread connecting her former working role to the crown. Now that thread had been cut, and both Meghan and Harry understood the symbolism. Anne received the confirmation with visible emotion, but the weight was no smaller. The Princess Royal accepted the responsibility as duty, not triumph, and made no attempt to celebrate what another woman had lost. Still, Anne understood. Every visit, speech, and anniversary connected to the organization would now be read as evidence that Meghan's royal chapter had closed. The transfer could be administratively clean while remaining emotionally explosive. Beatrice felt the danger. She was not angry that Anne had been chosen, and she was not trying to restore Meghan's position. What unsettled her was the speed. The younger royal learned that the handover could move ahead before the family considered the announcement, and she feared a practical decision was about to become public humiliation. That possibility pushed Beatrice into unfamiliar territory. Beatrice asked for a private conversation before any ceremonial announcement. The formal public presentation of a royal decision was allowed to define the story. Senior aides were startled. She had no authority to reverse the transfer, yet she made her purpose unmistakable. Dignity, not reinstatement. Meghan would lose the patronage, Anne would receive it, but the ending did not have to feel like punishment. That distinction created a problem. Someone inside the palace believed even Beatrice's limited intervention crossed a line. And as she prepared to speak, one question became impossible to ignore. Why did this particular patronage carry enough emotional history to make her step forward at all? To understand why Beatrice refused to remain silent, the story has to move beyond palace paperwork and into the complicated relationships connecting Meghan, Anne, and the younger royal caught unexpectedly between them. Behind the announcement stood 3 women facing 3 completely different realities. Meghan saw an ending. Anne saw another responsibility placed on her shoulders. Beatrice saw a family conflict turning dangerously public. None of them wanted the same thing, yet all 3 understood what the decision represented. One woman was losing her last official connection. Another was inheriting its burden. And the third was about to risk her carefully protected position by stepping directly between them. Meghan understood why the loss cut so deeply. Whatever distance separated her from the working monarchy, this patronage remained the last thread tying her former royal role to something recognized by the palace. A royal patronage, the formal relationship through which a family member lends prestige and support to an organization, carried no ownership, yet its symbolic power mattered. Losing the final one meant the institution could move forward without any official trace of her former place. Anne approached the moment differently. The Princess Royal had built her reputation around consistency, service, and showing up when duty demanded it. She sat with the briefing folder closed and asked one question: when did the organization need its new patron? Anne's restraint was deliberate. She would not turn another woman's loss into victory, but Meghan heard that calm differently. To her, the speed of Anne's acceptance made the transfer feel final, as if the machinery had been ready long before the announcement. Beatrice felt the tension tightening. Loyalty to the crown pulled one way. Sympathy for Meghan pulled another. She feared silence could look like approval of humiliation, even if she accepted the transfer itself. In a documented private family account, within this dramatized narrative, Beatrice remembered an earlier gathering when Meghan's future remained uncertain. During that conversation, Anne had warned that symbolic royal connections could not remain unresolved forever. Beatrice never forgot the firmness in her words, and Anne never pretended uncertainty could be permanent. That memory changed everything. Anne's appointment was not improvised, and Beatrice knew it. The possibility had existed for months, quietly prepared in case Meghan's final formal link became impossible to maintain. Meghan experienced the announcement as sudden, but Beatrice understood the palace had been waiting for a trigger. Anne had already imagined the practical consequences, and Meghan had never known how close the contingency had come to activation. Then one incident forced hesitation into action. Everyone connected to that private history remembered it, because from that moment, the question was no longer whether the patronage would change hands, but when. The transfer may have been announced today, but its true beginning lies in a private encounter months earlier, when one ceremonial appearance transformed hesitation into resolve. The final break did not begin with a legal review or a cold palace meeting. It began at a charity anniversary ceremony where Meghan's name was still attached to the organization, even though her participation had become increasingly uncertain. What should have been an uncomplicated celebration became the moment senior royals realized the arrangement could no longer remain suspended between two worlds. And according to this dramatized account, one exchange after that ceremony changed everything that followed. Anne understood the problem. The anniversary ceremony had been designed to honor the organization's work, yet questions kept circling back to Meghan and whether she remained an active royal patron. A royal patronage, the formal relationship through which a family member lends prestige and support to an organization, depends on clarity. Without it, attention drifts from the charity's mission toward confusion about palace relationships, and that confusion had become impossible to ignore. After the ceremony, Anne spoke privately with a senior organizer who said what others avoided. Staff no longer knew whether Meghan should be described as active, absent, or waiting to return. The admission landed heavily. Anne did not react with anger, but she left disturbed by what the uncertainty was doing to the organization. To her, preserving a ceremonial link without real responsibility risked weakening both the charity and the patronage itself. Beatrice heard about that exchange later and pushed back. She understood Anne's concern, but she feared the solution could become harsher than the problem. Removing Meghan's final patronage without a respectful handover, she argued, could transform an administrative correction into a public rejection. Anne did not dismiss her concern, yet she remained firm that uncertainty could not continue forever. Then another detail surfaced. In a documented message referenced within this dramatized account, Meghan had expressed affection for the organization, but stopped short of promising a future schedule. That warmth complicated everything. She had not rejected the cause, but neither had she offered the certainty the staff needed. For Anne, the message confirmed the emotional difficulty. For Beatrice, it proved Meghan's connection had not disappeared. Palace planners responded quietly. Anne's name was placed beside the patronage in a contingency document, a backup plan prepared in case the existing arrangement could no longer continue. Nothing was announced, no battle began, but the mechanism of succession had started moving. Beatrice never forgot that moment. She knew the decision had not appeared overnight, and when the contingency finally became reality, she decided the handover could not happen without confronting Anne directly. Months of silence were about to collapse into one private meeting, because Beatrice was ready to say what nobody else inside the palace had said aloud. Beatrice entered the room knowing she could not overturn the decision. Anne already had the patronage. The palace announcement was moving forward. Nothing about the constitutional position was uncertain. Yet Beatrice closed the door anyway. She had one argument left, and it was not about Meghan keeping a royal privilege. It was about whether the monarchy could remove that privilege without making the person losing it feel deliberately erased. Anne listened. Then came the question Beatrice feared most. Beatrice knew exactly where her authority ended. She was not a senior working royal, empowered to redistribute patronages, and she made no attempt to pretend otherwise. A working royal is a family member who carries out official duties on behalf of the monarch, while patronage decisions remain part of the crown's formal machinery. Anne understood that distinction too. The transfer had already moved beyond debate, with staff schedules, organizational messages, and future appearances being prepared around her new responsibility. The closed door sharpened everything. Beatrice told Anne that the decision itself might be justified, but the way it was announced could still become cruel. No aides were present. No prepared language softened the exchange. Anne folded her hands and asked whether duty should really be delayed simply to protect Meghan's feelings. The question landed harder because both women knew the answer could define what happened next. Beatrice did not retreat. She said duty should not be delayed, but dignity should survive, even when privilege does not. Meghan, she argued, was losing her final formal connection to royal service, and discovering the ceremonial details through headlines would turn closure into humiliation. Anne pushed back immediately. Royal responsibility, she said, could not remain frozen because family members found endings painful. Years of watching private emotion complicate public duty had made her deeply resistant to hesitation. Then Beatrice disclosed the detail that changed the room. In this dramatized account, she made clear during that private conversation that Meghan had never asked her to intervene. She had stepped forward alone because she feared the family would carry the consequences if the transfer looked like punishment rather than administration. Anne's resistance softened. She would not reverse the appointment, but she agreed to reconsider any wording that sounded triumphant. Anne gave Beatrice one final warning before the meeting ended. The language was not hers alone to control. Someone higher in the royal structure had approved the transfer, and that person would decide how hard the announcement ultimately landed, and neither woman could escape what that decision meant. Beatrice had changed the conversation, but not the chain of command, and the next decision belonged to the figure whose approval made Meghan's final loss official. The palace could soften the language, but it could not hide the reality. Anne had not simply volunteered to take Meghan's place. Her appointment had been approved at the highest level after weeks of review. That meant Beatrice was no longer negotiating with personal feelings alone. She was confronting a decision designed to settle an unresolved royal question permanently. And at the center of that decision stood Charles, forced to choose between family sensitivity and institutional clarity. Charles understood that his signature would turn preparation into finality. The king held the authority to approve how royal patronages connected to the crown were reassigned, and once he acted, Anne's position would no longer be a backup plan. A patronage reassignment means changing the royal representative attached to an organization. It does not remove a hereditary title passed through family lineage. Administratively, the distinction was simple. Emotionally, Charles knew it would feel anything but simple. Charles read the final briefing alone and stopped at one sentence. Meghan would hold no remaining royal patronages. He set the paper down before signing. The pause mattered because the monarch could already hear the interpretation forming beyond palace walls. Keeping an inactive connection alive risked confusion for the organization. Ending it completely, however, could look like a father-in-law using institutional power to punish his daughter-in-law. Anne carried Beatrice's argument directly to him. She explained that Beatrice had not challenged the appointment itself. She had challenged the tone surrounding it. That distinction unsettled Charles. The palace could be absolutely certain about what it was doing while still being careless about how the decision landed. He knew duty required clarity, but he also knew unnecessary humiliation could turn an administrative settlement into another family wound. Then Charles made his compromise. In the approved wording recorded in this dramatized account, he ordered the announcement to emphasize continuity of service rather than Meghan's removal. Anne would be presented as the person carrying the organization forward, not as the woman who had defeated someone else. Beatrice's intervention had changed the language, and Charles accepted that restraint without weakening the decision. But the king refused to change one crucial point. Anne's appointment would take effect immediately. There would be no shared period, no ceremonial overlap, and no lingering ambiguity about who represented the patronage. Charles had softened the voice of the palace, but he had made its boundary unmistakable. Within hours, that finality would reach Meghan, and whatever protection Beatrice had won in the wording could not protect her from what the decision truly meant. The palace had softened its voice without softening its decision, and now Meghan had to confront the reality Beatrice could not prevent. The wording was courteous, the meaning was brutal. Meghan no longer held a single royal patronage. For years, every debate about her relationship with the monarchy had contained some remaining technical connection, some thread that complicated the claim that the separation was complete. Now that thread was gone. Anne had inherited the responsibility. Beatrice had protected Meghan from harsher language, and Charles had approved the final transfer. But none of that changed what Meghan saw when she read it. Meghan understood the practical consequence immediately. Future appearances, anniversaries, correspondence, and ceremonial recognition connected to the organization would now belong to Anne. A ceremonial recognition is the formal public acknowledgement attached to a royal role, and it matters because it tells institutions and audiences who officially represents the crown. For Meghan, however, the loss reached beyond one charity. This patronage had remained the last formal reminder that she once occupied an active place inside the working royal structure. Meghan sat beside Harry after reading the announcement and said only that Anne would serve the organization well. Then she closed the message and pushed it away. Harry reacted more sharply. To him, the timing felt like another door being closed one by one, another proof that the institution was completing a separation it had been building for years. Meghan refused to let his anger become another public fight, but her calm did not mean the moment hurt less. Harry watched her struggle with a contradiction she could not escape. Meghan understood why an active patron could better serve the organization, yet the logic did nothing to soften the emotional sting of being replaced. She could accept the reasoning and still feel the loss. That was the cruel balance. Anne's appointment made institutional sense, while Meghan's pain remained deeply personal. Then the message from inside the family changed something. Meghan learned through a private documented exchange in this dramatized account that Beatrice had intervened without being asked. She had expected distance from the palace, not someone still inside the royal circle risking criticism simply to make the transition less humiliating. Beatrice had not fought to restore the patronage. She had fought to preserve dignity. Meghan answered privately after several minutes. She sent Beatrice a short private message, thanking her for remembering that endings could still be handled with compassion. Beatrice quietly read it alone, and the words forced one final choice. She could remain a mediator who had quietly softened the announcement, or she could speak directly to Meghan without palace involvement. The official battle was over, but the human one was not, and Beatrice now prepared for the conversation that would determine what her intervention truly meant. There were no aids, no prepared statements, and no institutional language left to hide behind. When Beatrice finally spoke directly with Meghan, neither woman pretended the patronage could be restored. That was never the purpose of the conversation. Instead, Beatrice wanted her to understand why she had stepped in, and Meghan wanted to know whether compassion inside the royal family still existed when loyalty to the crown pointed in another direction. Their exchange became the turning point neither side had expected. Beatrice began carefully. She made clear that she had never questioned Anne's suitability or Charles's authority, and she had never intended to reopen a decision already settled. Her concern was narrower and more human. The patronage transfer, meaning the official reassignment of a royal representative from one person to another, could happen without turning Meghan's final formal loss into a public humiliation. That distinction mattered, because the role represented years of service, memory, and belonging. Meghan understood immediately. She did not ask Beatrice to lobby for reinstatement, and she did not suggest the decision should be reversed. Instead, she listened as the younger royal admitted that she had feared the announcement would become a spectacle of removal, rather than a transition of responsibility. Meghan went quiet before thanking her for recognizing the difference. For the first time since reading the palace message, she felt someone inside the family understood what the ending actually cost. Beatrice then confessed something more personal. Stepping in had frightened her. She valued her place within the family and knew that appearing to take sides in the Sussex dispute could attract scrutiny from every direction. Meghan answered with unexpected softness. She said she had never wanted relatives forced to choose between private kindness and institutional loyalty. The admission stripped the conflict of its easy villains and winners. Then Meghan revealed, through their private conversation in this dramatized account, that she had already accepted the patronage would eventually pass to another royal. The loss itself was painful, but that was not her deepest fear. She dreaded seeing the transfer used to define her entire royal history as failure. Beatrice responded with one final detail. Anne had personally rejected any language that sounded triumphant after their confrontation. That changed Meghan's understanding. The woman inheriting the role had also resisted turning the handover into punishment. Anne had accepted the duty without claiming victory, and Beatrice had protected the dignity of the ending without challenging the crown. And by morning, that private restraint would collide with a far louder judgment. Inside the family, the sharpest edges had softened, but outside the palace, the story was about to explode into something none of them could control. By morning, the carefully softened palace wording had lost control of the story. Broadcasters focused on one phrase. Meghan had no royal patronages left. Commentators called Anne the safest possible successor. Others questioned why Beatrice had intervened at all. Within hours, an administrative transfer became a referendum on loyalty, exile, service, and family. Yet one public image cut through every argument, a moment outside Buckingham Palace that captured just how differently people understood what had happened. Beatrice felt the pressure almost immediately. Media coverage presented Anne's appointment as evidence that the monarchy was consolidating patronages around active working royals who could appear regularly and give organizations consistent support. A working royal is a family member who carries out official duties on behalf of the crown, and that practical distinction now dominated the debate. Meghan's loss, meanwhile, was framed as the symbolic completion of her institutional separation. Outside Buckingham Palace, the argument became impossible to ignore. A small crowd gathered beneath television cameras while the announcement led the morning coverage. One supporter held a handwritten sign praising Anne's service. Another nearby called for dignity toward Meghan. The contrast became the defining public moment of the morning. Beatrice watched the coverage uneasily, worried that her private attempt to reduce conflict had created the appearance of a new royal faction. That fear mattered because neutrality had protected her place inside a family already divided by years of public tension and private mistrust. Anne refused to feed that narrative. At her first engagement connected to the patronage, she spoke only about the organization's work and declined to discuss Meghan personally. The restraint frustrated commentators looking for confrontation, but it also reinforced what Beatrice had tried to protect. This was supposed to be a transfer of responsibility, not a public victory. Anne stayed disciplined, and Beatrice understood why that mattered. Then palace aides quietly clarified, through an attributed background briefing in this dramatized account, that Beatrice had never attempted to overturn Charles's decision or challenge Anne's appointment. She had argued only for a respectful handover. Meghan offered no public retaliation either. Her silence surprised those expecting an angry response and reflected the private understanding reached with Beatrice. The patronage was gone, but she would not turn the ending into another war. By evening, the noise began to soften. The public battle was fading, but the emotional meaning remained. Meghan had lost her final patronage. Anne had inherited the duty, and Beatrice had exposed something more complicated than simple loyalty. The cameras could move on, the headlines could change, but the monarchy still had to live with what this decision revealed about duty, distance, and the fragile possibility of kindness between them. There would be no reversal, no shared arrangement, no surprise restoration months later. Meghan's final royal patronage now belonged to Anne, and the institutional separation was complete. Yet the story did not end with humiliation, because Beatrice changed something more subtle than the decision itself. She proved that a royal could accept the crown's judgment without treating another family member's loss as a victory. In a family defined by rank and responsibility, that distinction became the most meaningful outcome of all. Anne settled into the responsibility with the same discipline that had shaped her wider public service. The organization finally had an active representative, ending the uncertainty that began months earlier at the anniversary ceremony. A royal patronage is the formal relationship through which a member of the family publicly supports an organization, and this one now had unquestioned leadership. For Meghan, that clarity carried a harder truth. The final administrative link between her former working role and the palace had disappeared. Beatrice met Anne after the first successful engagement under the new arrangement and asked quietly whether the transition finally felt settled. Anne answered that the organization was secure, and that was what mattered. She offered no celebration and no sense of conquest. Beatrice understood then that she had never saved Meghan's patronage. What she had protected was smaller, but deeply human. The possibility that a painful ending could happen without unnecessary cruelty. Meghan reached the same conclusion privately. She did not frame Anne as an enemy, nor did she deny the sadness of what had been lost. In a documented private exchange within this dramatized account, she accepted that the Princess Royal could serve the organization effectively while allowing herself to grieve what the role had once represented. Meghan had lost the position, but she refused to let that loss become another public war. Charles recognized the difference as well. The king understood that Beatrice's intervention had prevented a clean administrative decision from becoming another full-scale family confrontation. Her influence had come without formal power. She had simply known when certainty needed restraint, and Charles understood that the monarchy had benefited from that judgment. Anne delivered the final verdict through her conduct. She inherited responsibility, not a trophy. Meghan lost the patronage. Beatrice protected the dignity of the ending. One royal connection ended, another duty began, and the monarchy proved that separation did not have to demand emotional destruction. The chapter closed not with victory or defeat, but with compassion surviving where duty could not bend. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.